of coffee.
This is an NBC News special report. Here's Tom Yamas.
We're coming on the air with breaking news right now from Fort Stewart, Georgia, where the Army is holding a news conference on an active shooter incident where 5 soldiers were apparently shot earlier today. That news conference has started. Let's listen in.
GWES. He's the commanding general of the 3rd Infantry Division. Brigadier General Lubis will make a statement regarding the incident and take a few brief questions. Before we begin, however, I'd like to go over just a couple things with you. We have limited time for questions given that this is an ongoing investigation, and we may not have all the information that we can share, but we will try to be as transparent as possible. We will not release the name of any victims until the next of kin notification has been complete. We will not speculate as to any intentions, motives, or backstories, given that this is an ongoing investigation. When you ask your questions, we ask that you please give your name and the affiliation in case we need to do a follow-up. And it's a little hard to hear, so please speak up so that General Lubis can hear you and that you can hear him. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I will now turn it over to General Lubis.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for joining us. This morning, shortly before 11 o'clock, an active duty soldier assigned to Fort Stewart, Georgia, shot and wounded 5 of his fellow soldiers here on Fort Stewart. Thankfully, all are in stable condition and all are expected to recover. The alleged shooter is in custody. We have reestablished security. I have lifted all lockdown measures on Fort Stewart, and there is currently no threat to the local community. I'd like to recognize and thank our Army law enforcement and medical personnel and our partners from local, state, and federal law enforcement and emergency services for their quick response and support. I would also like to thank the brave soldiers who immediately intervened and subdued the shooter. These soldiers, without a doubt, prevented further casualties. Our wounded soldiers were initially evacuated to Wynn Army Community Hospital right here on Fort Stewart. All arrived in stable condition, and 3 of the 5 required surgical intervention. 2 have been transported to Memorial Hospital in Savannah, Georgia for additional care. We have identified the alleged shooter as Sergeant Cornelius Radford, an automated logistics sergeant assigned to 2nd Brigade Combat Team. Sergeant Radford has not previously deployed to combat. Sergeant Radford has been interviewed by the Army Criminal Investigation Division and is currently in pretrial confinement, awaiting a charging decision by the Office of the Special Trial Counsel. Right now, our primary focus is first on caring for our injured soldiers and their families, and also supporting the soldiers of the Spartan Brigade. All of the families of the victims have been notified, and we're wrapping our arms around them and ensuring we provide them all the support that we can. Before I take questions, I want to remind you that this is an ongoing investigation, and we're still gathering questions. And ladies and gentlemen, I'll now take your questions.
General Lewis Levine, Coastal News. Can you give us his what unit he was assigned to and how long he served in the Army? If you didn't mention it.
Yeah, he is assigned to one of our sustainment units here in 2nd Brigade Combat Team at Fort Stewart, and I will have to confirm how long he served with us. Yes, sir.
Corresponding with the Associated Press, as best you can, knowing it's so early, can you walk us through where this happened, what happened in the shooting, and were the victims subordinates of the sergeants, or were they people over him in rank?
Yeah, right now it's premature, and we're gathering a lot of the information. What we know is this soldier, the shooting occurred at the soldier's place of work. It did involve his co-workers. We're still not certain about the motivations, but again, he's been interviewed by Army investigators, and we believe we'll gain more information here shortly.
General,
yes, ma'am.
WSAD, do you know if this was any kind of training exercise, or were they cleaning any weapons, anything that you know?
No, ma'am. We don't have any reason to believe it had anything to do with a training event. Other than that, I can't state the motivations for this soldier.
We've heard that the shooter
Yes,
may
sir.
have been from Jacksonville, Florida. Are you able to confirm that? We also heard that he had maybe been arrested for DUI recently.
Yeah, at this point, I can't confirm where he's from. We can follow up on that. I do believe he was arrested locally for a DUI that was unknown to his chain of command until the event occurred, and we started looking into the law enforcement databases.
Robin, from the current, can you tell us whether or not that was a military weapon or whether this was a personal weapon that the person brought on base?
Yes, ma'am. I can confirm it was not a military weapon, and we believe it was a personal handgun. Yes, sir.
What does this mean for ongoing security measures?
Yeah, I'm very confident in the security of this installation. We've got a great partnership with local law enforcement. As you can see here at our gates, we have armed guards in protective equipment. This one's a bit difficult, and we're going to have to determine how he was able to get a handgun to his place of duty.
LCOA News for Jack. Has the suspect had any prior disciplinary or behavioral issues on base?
No, ma'am, not that we're aware of. But again, it's early in the investigation, but not that I'm currently aware of.
You mentioned that some soldiers helped subdue him. Do you know if his arrest ultimately surrendered peacefully, or what's his arrest?
I don't have the details on that, but I know that his soldiers in the area that witnessed the shooting immediately and without hesitation tackled the soldiers, subdued him, that allowed law enforcement to then take him into custody.
And we've got time for one more question.
I know that you can't speak to the motivation, but, you know, if this turns out to be some situation where somebody had extremist beliefs or maybe classified as a terrorist attack, I mean, how does that change the basis of response or the basis of investigation?
Yeah, currently we have no reason to believe any of that is the case. However, we continuously assess the threat environment, both in the immediate area and across our Army and DoD installations, and we will address the threat level accordingly.
Get the rank of the shooter?
Yes, sir. He was a sergeant. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your questions, and again, thanks to the local responders and the local community for their help. Thanks, and have a great afternoon.
Thank you, sir.
Hey, I'm going to give you the proper spelling.
We've just been listening in there to the news conference at Fort Stewart, Georgia there, about as good news as you can get in a situation like this. There was an active shooter who happened to be a soldier as well in Fort Stewart. His name, Sergeant Cornelius Radford, according to the general in charge of that base there, telling the press that essentially he went to his place of business, his place of work today, shot his fellow co-workers with a personal handgun. It was not a military-issued weapon, shooting and wounding 5 soldiers. They are all in stable condition right now. 3 of the 5 required surgery, but they're going to survive along with the other 2. That Sergeant Radford, is now in custody. They said containment while he awaits charges as well. They've also learned that he was arrested earlier for DUI. A motive in this case is still unknown. This happened just before 11 a.m. again on Fort Stewart space. Some of the initial reports here were pretty bad, but again, 5 people have been shot, all soldiers. They are going to survive. I want to get to Jesse Kirsch, who's been tracking this story for us all day. And Jesse, tough to get any good news out of a story like this, but this is about as good as it can get, that all 5 soldiers are going to survive.
Yeah, when we hear the word stable condition, Tom, right, that is a sigh of relief. When you talk about the aftermath of a shooting, the general did just mention that 2 of the 5 soldiers who were shot by this alleged suspect were transported to a hospital in Savannah, Georgia. And if you plug that into a GPS, it's about an hour drive away. Of course, that's if you or I were driving in a civilian vehicle, not in an ambulance or a military vehicle, which would be able to get through traffic more quickly, you would imagine. But still a good distance away to get to Savannah, which is more than 40 miles away. This has had a ripple effect throughout communities both near and further away. What you're looking at on screen is Fort Stewart outside of Savannah on the eastern side of Georgia, but to the left of where it is, to the western part of the community, about 25 miles away, there was a school district back to school for the first days of the school year this week. And they went into temporary lockdowns. We're talking about K through 12 students, more than 3,000 students, according to that school district in Appling County. And for a time, kindergartners in their first days of school were dealing with an active shooter situation, lockdown. And that just speaks to how this rippled beyond Fort Stewart directly. A couple of the things that stuck out to me in this press conference, Tom, you mentioned it. This is believed to have been a personal handgun, not a military weapon. And the question for the general and his investigators that he says is something they're looking into is how this suspect would have been able to get that handgun onto a military installation with armed security in a place that is filled with soldiers for training, being prepared for deployment. This is a place that can handle large military aircraft and can handle getting large pieces of equipment out for the military around the globe as listed online. So clearly an important installation and some security questions there. And as you mentioned, also questions about a potential DUI for the suspect recently, this involving the soldiers' co-workers. But again, another headline out of this, Tom, there is no threat to the community now, and this appears to have been a situation that is now wrapped up, Tom.
All right, Jesse Kirsch, stand by for us. I want to bring in our senior national security correspondent, Courtney Kuby. She's at the Pentagon tonight. Courtney, one thing that was interesting was that the general there said that other soldiers intervened and they took down their fellow soldier, essentially making sure he could not shoot or harm anyone else on the base. Obviously, these people are trained for combat, but this had to be a surprising and shocking incident for those soldiers on that base.
Yeah, Tom, I completely zeroed in on that part of the press conference as well. The fact that fellow soldiers actually subdued this soldier as he was shooting at what we just learned were his fellow soldiers in his same unit at his place of work. They subdued him, they took him down, and they held on to him until until the law enforcement could show up and put him in what we now learn is a pretrial confinement. There were a few other things that really stood out to me here, Tom, from General Lubis. Number one, the soldier, a sergeant, he's assigned to a sustainment company as part of the 2nd Brigade combat team there at Fort Stewart. Basically, that means he does logistics support, everything from, basic logistics that you think of to financial, even personnel issues. But the general making a point that the individuals, this was his place of work, and the individuals who he targeted here were his fellow soldiers in his unit. That was very telling to me. Also, what you were just talking about with Jesse here, the idea of this being his personal handgun. One thing to remember, when a soldier checks in on one of these bases, unless you need your military issued weapon as part of your job, so something like a military police officer, there are procedures for what you're supposed to do with your military issued weapon. That would generally be checking it into an armory, putting it in some sort of a safekeeping. But if you are a soldier assigned to that base, or frankly even a civilian, a contractor, someone who has access to the base, generally you can get on the base in your vehicle or whatever it is without being checked. Even though it's not supposed to happen, this incident alone just shows how it is easy in some cases for people to get a weapon onto base without it being detected. In this case, as we learned from General Lubis, the 5 soldiers who were shot here or were injured here are in stable condition. 2 of them were transported to a local facility for further care. Most likely that was because Wynn Army Community Hospital there on base, yes, it can handle a lot. But if you're talking about a more extensive surgery, a more extensive injuries, they might, it wouldn't surprise me if they would move them to another hospital nearby that might have a little bit more extensive capability and might have more specialized care for someone with that sort of care. The other things that really stood out to me here, Jesse mentioned the DUI. It appears that the soldier did not actually notify his command of that, but the general said that at this point they are not aware of any other behavioral issues or other disciplinary issues with this soldier. They're looking into it still. And then, of course, just one thing that tends to come up when we have these sorts of incidents, Tom, they are not aware of any combat deployments that the sergeant had.
Courtney, briefly before you go, they mentioned he is in containment right now awaiting charges. Will this be a military trial, or will there be criminal charges from that county?
So officials believe at this point this is probably going to live in the military court of justice, and that's because it involves an active duty soldier. It involves soldiers as the victim. It was on a base, but I wouldn't discount the possibility that it could, for one reason or another, move off. But again, at this point, they believe that he will be held in his pretrial confinement there for some period of time. Most likely he will be moved to another more secure or stable facility off of Fort Stewart. And then it appears at this point he is going to be tried in the military court of justice.
Okay, Courtney Kuby for us. Courtney, we thank you for that. Jesse Kirsch, our thanks as well. That's going to conclude this NBC News special report. We're going to have much more ahead on our streaming network, NBC News Now, online always at NBCnews.com, and a full wrap-up tonight when I see you on Nightly News. I'm Tom Yamas. We thank you so much for watching.